The problem with this episode is that the villains aren't really there, so the only tension that you're getting is from the plot that's being given. It could feel potentially underwhelming to some new viewers.
Created by MC Films. Doctor Who, the classic podcast. The Ghost Monument, Episode 2.
Hello and welcome to a new episode of Doctor Who, the classic podcast. I'm Matt and today we're going to be talking about Doctor Who, the Ghost Monument. This is the second episode of Series 11 of Doctor Who with Jodie Whittaker at the helm of the TARDIS controls. Now, this is going to be, as with all episodes of this podcast, just a informal discussion about how the episode landed, whether it worked well, all the different elements surrounding it at the time of broadcast, and 1 year later a reflection on how the episode still holds up to this very day. So, to start off, first of all, we're going to be giving a little bit of context. So this is the second episode, released on the 14th of October 2018. It's written by Chris Chibnall, who has wrote the first episode and writes the majority of Series 11 episodes, especially within the first 5. Pretty much the first 5 episodes of a 10 episode series. He takes a lot of creative control over how he's working with the characters and developing them further, and I think to have a writer take control of the characters first thing to really mould them into how they're going to be appearing for future episodes is a decision that I'm quite happy with, actually. I think no one is going to understand how they want to take the characters further than the person that started them all off, and I think to keep developing them over the first few episodes to really challenge them and then give them to other writers to fully explore this universe that they're in is a great decision. So we start off with characters, and the first character that I want to talk about is the Doctor. Already you can tell that she is fully invested into this role. Jodie Whittaker has taken this role and expanded on what we saw in the episode before and gives a brand new appearance to the Doctor and to how the character interacts with others. Especially within that first scene, she commands the screen whenever she's on and completely pulls you into the episode with some incredibly well written dialogue and excellent delivery. It's fantastic to watch, especially within the first scene where we're getting the Doctor and Yasmin along with character Epzo, played by Sean Dooley, on a crashing spaceship. And I'll talk a bit more about this scene in particular later, but just the way it's shot and the way it's acted gives this massive urgent feel to the scene, and it really works. She's excited to be on a new alien planet for the first time. So we first saw it in Sheffield, and now we find it on the planet Desolation, which is on the other side of the solar system to planet Earth. So unless I'm remembering incorrectly, the last time we saw the Doctor on an alien planet was Series 10, Episode 2. So it's been a long time since we saw a new alien planet. So we had a lot of Victorian and present day Doctor Who episodes within the Series 10 run of the show, and whenever we weren't really there, we were on some form of space station a la Oxygen and World Enough and Time and the Doctor Falls, coupled in the fact of the filming location really looks like something that we've never seen on the show before. It looks cinematic, it feels barren, and it is brilliantly done. It's so nice to see that it's not filmed in a quarry, that they've actually gone out on location to South Africa and to really brought this episode into what feels like and felt like at the time a modern approach to it. We're actually getting locations that we wouldn't normally see, and the reliance on a lack of, let's say, CGI in creating this world and this approach to the planet Desolation really helps invest the characters and makes you feel as though you're watching something that is tangible to the story. And I think it's really benefited by the dialogue that we see that Chris Chibnall writes to give these character moments in a completely alien situation, enforces the fact that the characters are in way out of their depth, and even the Doctor, who is normally a hugely important figure to the plot, is out of her depth in this episode, with it being on a different planet. And yeah, I will speak about it more later on. She is excited by that, but she's also scared and worried for a friend's safety. She, across the first half of the episode, is constantly looking out for her friends and explaining that they weren't meant to be here, and that her importance is just getting in her ship and moving on. That's all she wants to know, whilst helping out the characters that are in this situation, Epzo and Angstrom. There are some beautiful interactions with Jodie Whittaker and the alien tech in this episode, specifically the sniper bots, the tunnel system towards the end of the story, and the TARDIS, which we finally get to see in full HD, gloriously brought to life by the BBC in this new iteration of the exterior console. And the with the exterior shots of the model and the interior console work, it's beautiful. But again, we'll talk about that later on. So the Doctor is pretty much in this episode someone that is regarded as being caring for her friends, like we see in the first episode, but really out for the sense of adventure and wonder. It feels like they're trying to recapture what we kind of found in the RTD era, especially since Stephen Moffat's last series, Series 10, potentially alienated some people in a slightly negative manner. So going on to the trio of characters that we've got with the Doctor, I'll start off with Graham. He's caring for Ryan and looking after him in the spaceship when they get pulled in with the gravity scoop. It's such a nice moment to see Graham reassuring Ryan at multiple times throughout this story. So we've got the scene on the boat where Ryan and Graham are talking at the start, where they get to the ship and they're trying to rebuild the chemistry between them after what's happened with Grace. They feel as though they need to talk about this to get over the boundary, but Ryan's quite matter of fact at the task in hand, whereas Graham's quite philosophical at this moment, and he's actually trying to open up Ryan's approach to dealing with grief that they found in the first episode. It's a wonderful piece. Again, multiple times throughout this story we get Graham overlooking Ryan, either when he's been captured from the spaceship at the start of the episode to when he's falling asleep on the boat. There's moments of him being the first figure that Ryan sees, and linking into where the character development really goes in this series. It's a really wonderful moment to actually realise that Graham is still trying to care, and the words that he was saying to Grace on the train in the first episode are still relevant. He is trying to look out for Ryan, but feels as though there's an obstacle in the way, and unfortunately due to Grace's death, that obstacle is overemphasised within this episode. He becomes authoritative towards Angstrom and is on her side when pitted against Epzo. So when Armstrong is determined to carry on with the race that they're in, the race of the 12 galaxies, and to move on and win. She's fought for so long and so hard about how she's going to win, and this is the final obstacle that they've got to get through in order to win, and Graham and Ryan are in the way. And Graham fully steps on board her. You know, he says, we're not going anywhere until we get our friends back. He's looking out for the safety of the other people that he's not only known for a very short amount of time, at least from what we've seen, we can establish that due to Ryan and Yaz's connection at school, that Graham potentially would have been a figure in Yasmin's life. It's never confirmed on screen. However, this episode reinforces the care that Graham takes into looking after not only Ryan, but Yasmin and the Doctor as well, and the people around them that they interact with, because he knows it's the right thing to do. He feels as though he has a duty of care, being one of the elder members of the TARDIS, and again, one of the older characters that we may have seen on the TARDIS team. After the Doctor is quote-unquote defeated by the story, so Angstrom and Epzo, who is played by Art Malik and Sean Dooley, and I forget the actress's name that played Armstrong, unfortunately. However, he is an optimist. He's always looking for the best way out, for reassuring the other characters that what they're doing is not only good, but that they're going to be safe with doing it and it's beneficial to them. And I think it's really, really special to see that. Because normally it comes from the Doctor, but at this moment the Doctor is completely defeated. So for Graham to be that secondary rock, that more human element, you can push the Doctor into the alienness, which I believe is what they're trying to do with Jodie Whittaker's Doctor. So Yasmin has some really lovely moments with Armstrong, however, really works well. Her best character moment in this episode is when she's bouncing off Jodie's Doctor and Sean Dooley in the spaceship at the start. It's frantic, it's kinetic. She's scared, but she's also determined to help because of her training with the police. She's determined that she can find a way out of the situation that they're in. She's treating it, let's say, as a hostile or a potential like terrorism threat that she's involved in. I know that's quite an extreme, but you would have to treat it like that in her situation, and she does really well with trying to help and balancing being scared because she's determined to do what is right. She remains optimistic, however her police training causes her to often put her guard up and think more logically to solve problems, and I think that works. That just seems to gel really nicely with how the actress Mandip Gill portrays her within the series and in subsequent growths. We get more Yaz-centric and more moments where Yaz lets her guard down a bit later in the series, and you can tell with the development of it how her character's mellowed out and become to see that life isn't all about logicalness. Life has a way of surprising you and bouncing into new areas that you may not have seen before, and Mandip does a really good job at portraying that through Yaz. She's in complete awe of the Doctor, and even helps her to stand off against the sniper bots during the middle of the story when they attack them in the training room. Now, it's really nice to see a character that is inspired by the Doctor again. Yes, we got that with Bill, and yes, we got that with Clara. However, with Bill, she was more inspired to grow into a woman from education. Yasmin has already made her stance on the earth. She's already a police officer doing what is right, and to have someone that she can look up to that sees almost the same outlook that Yasmin would, it helps make her feel like she has a place where she belongs. She mentions in the episode that she doesn't get on with her family when they're on the boat, and Armstrong says, you know, they're all you've got. And Yasmin not only looks at her, but she looks around to the other characters on the boat, the Dr. Ryan and Graham. This is her new family, almost, that she feels a place where she's accepted and connected with the other characters that she doesn't have at the police station and she doesn't have at home, and it's beautiful. So Ryan, his dyspraxia is still there, as it naturally would be for a character to have an ailment that is more human-centric. And it plays an effect into this, you know, when they have to climb the ladder down into the tunnels towards the middle of the story, and then when they have to climb back at the pinnacle of Act 3. Having this is really developing his character, and he can see that he wants to do it in his eyes. You can tell that he wants to overcome it, and he feels let down by his ability to not be able to, but the Doctor pushes him forward and says, you know, you're doing brilliantly, you're doing really well, distract yourself, think about this, think about facts about the gas that we know is on this planet, and that helps really helped Ryan to connect to not only the Doctor but to us. We're rooting for him as well to succeed and to overcome this boundary that's been set by him, because, like I mentioned in the first podcast, it's a completely natural thing to have. However, when pitted against everything that we learn that this character does in terms of travelling to different planets and different moments in history and influencing them and doing what is good, it really helps him to have a personal obstacle that he can overcome while still retaining the core elements of the TARDIS team. It's really nice. His character in this episode comes across as someone that needs protecting and needs guarding, often pushing himself into situations without thinking about the repercussions. So the main scene that I was talking about here is the Call of Duty moment. So when they arrive in the training room, Ryan picks up a gun and says, you know, we can fire back, we can defend ourselves, why not? And Graham says, come on, Doc, you know, he's got an idea here. And the Doctor's saying, no, we can resort to this without violence. And Ryan says, no, I've trained for this, it's Call of Duty, man, and takes on the sniper bots. So he shoots down 4 in what is quite a not only funny juxtaposition to the scene before, but unfortunately does come across as a little bit cringy and a little bit too kind of... I understand that his character is based off a teenage model. I believe it's stated that he is 19. However, it does come across as feeling a little bit cringy. However, if this adds to the characters, I'm not 100% against it, as long as it doesn't bog down what's happening around them within the rest of the environment of the story. So he's fascinated about what's there in the universe, but he's also really scared about what's out there because it's nothing that he's ever seen. You know, we establish in the first episode that he works in a warehouse. He doesn't really feel like he belongs anywhere with... We never see him interact or talk about any of his other friends. It's always Graham, Yasmin and the Doctor and Grace and the characters that they meet along the way. We get the connection with Ryan and Yasmin. However, I think he feels as though he should do what is right for the universe because he's finally found somewhere where he can settle in and belong. This episode really culminates to the point where these characters are starting to slot into a team element. And we see it right at the start. You know, we've got Graham and Ryan on one ship and Yasmin and the Doctor on the other. And they're both on their own separate journeys. The episode could have quite easily split the two teams till right at the end and still would have worked just as well because the characters are the ones that build it. And I believe Chibnall's approach to this series is taking character to the main focus. And luckily in this episode it doesn't sacrifice on the plot, which is a really nice thing to see. So the villains of this episode are the Remnants. They're cloth figures who exist on the planet being brought to life at night. So they were created by the scientists that were on this planet as a way of kind of a genetic experiment, so you will. They're capable of smothering people and flying, and they nearly smother Epzo in one scene. I believe it's just established that they can do this. I think the main problem with this episode is that the villains are not at the forefront of this. It is something completely different taking the main helm of this episode. But unfortunately, the problem with this episode is that the villains aren't really there. So the only tension that you're getting is from the plot that's been given. The plot itself is solid. However, without the visible appearance of a villain, it could feel potentially underwhelming to some new viewers. The Remnants can also read memories and relay that back to people to get them scared, to make them fear themselves. However, they don't appear as life signs either, so they are a completely kind of synthetic telepathic force that exist due to a scientific experiment. It's interesting to see, however, because there's no real emphasis on why these guys are bad, it doesn't really feel as though they are developed nearly enough than they could, and they don't have enough potential in this episode to continue as a recurring threat. But we've also got the sniper bots, and here's where it's quite interesting. So they're an obstacle. All their premise in the episode is they're an obstacle for the rally of the 12 galaxies on Desolation. However, they really work quite well. They're essentially a surveillance team for the main building of the race of the 12 galaxies. They're within this as a form of security, surveillance. They oversee any hostile threat, who in this case, because of... So Epzo moves into the monument on his own and trips a security feature which alerts the sniper bots, which gets them to go and track him down because they've got life sign signals. Epzo shoots them, and then they go into a self-defense mode which alerts the other guards, which at this moment in time have appeared around the Dr. Graham, Rhyme and Yaz. They then start attacking them, and the kind of chase is on from that moment, if you like the pun for Bradley Walsh on the Chase game show on ITV. They use laser-based weaponry to chase down the Doctor and friends, and their targeting system works on straight lines, which the Doctor says when they're running away, don't run in straight lines, they can trace you. They're tracking your movement, so blur them out, basically. I think if the episode potentially had the characters landing on the planet being chased by the sniper bots from the beginning, I think it could have worked. The threat of the enemy would have been there, escalating throughout the whole thing. However, to have them turn up approximately 30 minutes into a 50-minute episode, and to have them wrapped up within about 10 minutes, even with the remnants, just feels rushed. And it feels like the enemies were a complete afterthought into how this episode was going to be done. But again, the episode isn't about enemies, but should it be? Could it be? Would it have benefited from that? We don't know, really. So the plot of the episode. So the gang are in space from the end of episode 1. They're caught by the spaceships and split in half, with Ryan, Graham and Angstrom on one, and the Doctor, Yasmin and Epzo on the other. There's a fabulous shot in this when the Doctor, Yasmin and Epzo are on the spaceship. Their entire interactions, yes, it's intercut with the other half of the team, but their interactions are done in what must be one of the longest shots ever put in Doctor Who, one of the most technically challenging shots in Doctor Who, and must only cut between them 4 or 5 times, and it's always within one shot or a couple of shots, especially at the start with it being one shot for a good 45-50 seconds. And that is impressive. There is a lot of technobabble, a lot of direction in this. So the set for the spaceship was built raised with hydraulic pistons underneath to be able to rock it alongside the camera that was in there on a Steadicam. The interactions are brilliant. We're going from bits of green screen with CGI to bits without, to the point where the jet is in the back of the ship, and the shot of that, of the camera slowly kind of waldering over to the door to see the jettison spaceship, looks really, really good. I remember watching this on a group chat to my friends and just being in complete awe with how this episode looks. It's beautiful. The presentation is fantastic. So they land on the planet and discover the Tent, who has Ilin in, played by Art Malik. So they're realising that they're in the finals of the Rally of the 12 Galaxies. They have to move across the planet at one point via a solar-powered boat through the wrecked city and towards the Ghost Monument. Whoever gets there first wins. That is the plot. The Doctor argues that she needs more context to get her friends home, asks what the Ghost Monument is, and the Ghost Monument is the TARDIS. That's beautiful. The Ghost Monument being the TARDIS is really, really nice. It just seems to work. The phrase, the Ghost Monument, implies kind of death, afterlife, almost the kind of unseen mystery towards it. And the fact that it's based on the TARDIS that we as an audience haven't seen, it's the connection with the words associated with ghost and the words associated with monument being portrayed towards this new iteration of the TARDIS is beautiful. It's almost like poetry, and I think it's wonderfully mystical and wonderfully influenced by Moffat's approach to Doctor Who, so the fairy tale elements. It works brilliantly. So they then find underground tunnels that act as a shortcut across to the Ghost Monument, and this is where Epzo is attacked by the remnants. This is where the sniper bots find them at the top of the tunnels. So basically they then follow the map, run to the exit, appear there. However, before then, it's a fantastic moment. So we work out that the scientist died from creating weapons of mass destruction for the Stenza, with the dead being cleared up by the remnants, so there's no bodies. And the Doctor discovers kind of like a will about the people that were working on the project, and they stated that it was the Stenza. They're coming for them. They are going to die. And to keep this presence of the Stenza throughout the first episode, the second episode, I see them as definitely being the returning villains of this series. But to have the kind of enemy threat constantly being in the background, no matter where they are, it's constantly plaguing Ryan and Graham, and it's constantly affecting the Doctor and Yasmin. It's constantly there, following them wherever they are. They cannot escape. It's tense. It's really, really tense, but it's a good kind of tense. So after they do that, they defeat the remnants. Epzo has a cigar that takes half a lifetime of one of his people to make, to roll, to age, and he's going to use that in terms of victory. So there is gas in the air at this time created by the remnants, and the Doctor and the team throw up the cigar. It lights with a click of the fingers, and it explodes all the gas in the air, sets that alight, kills the remnants, and basically allows them to get away. However, it's never stated as to how far it spread and when it dissipated, which can be a bit of a tonal jump from the fiery sky to completely fine in the next shot. That can be a bit jumpy. So after discussing either Epzo or Angstrom going to win, the Doctor decides that they should go in and declare being joint winners of the rally. Angstrom and Epzo really kind of push Art Malik's character, almost threaten. Well, Epzo does threaten him at some point, saying, you know, if all this was for absolutely nothing, then I will find you and I will hunt you down. I will make sure that your last moments are both excruciating and long. Then they all disappear. They're transported to the winning ceremony, leaving the Doctor, Ryan, Yasmin and Graham on Desolation. And it doesn't jump to the TARDIS being visible for a good minute, and it's tense. You are thinking, what are we going to do? The Doctor's given up all hope, and the characters are like, you know, it's okay. Like, we've had a good time, we've enjoyed it, but isn't there anything that you can do? But if there's not, it's fine, don't worry. And the Doctor's given up hope completely. So the TARDIS then starts to appear. Yasmin notices it first, which is a wonderful connection. She's almost looking out for the supernatural at this point. She's still on a guard and she's looking out for more adventure and discovery. The Doctor then stabilises the ship, so it's been moving in and out of flux for years and years, which is why when they transported to the TARDIS at the end of last week's episode, The Woman Who Fell to Earth, the TARDIS wasn't there. And neither was the planet. It was moving out of flux within the day's rotation. And as we later, with hindsight, get into the series finale, that is explained as to why the planet isn't there. And I think it's a wonderful payoff for that moment. So then the Doctor runs up to the TARDIS, and we get some really lovely motherly moments with Jodie and the TARDIS. it really feels like an old friend has returned at this moment. To see Jodie Whittaker really soften to the fact that the TARDIS has come back. You know, she's holding her hands over it, she's stroking the new letterwork on the pull to open hatch. You know, she's saying, "You are a beautiful thing," and then says, "I don't have my keys." And the TARDIS opens. It's the wonderful connection to the Doctor and her ship. It's beautiful. So Jodie steps inside and we get a really claustrophobic feel of just in the doorway with the four walls of the police box prop, and that kind of really drags on the reveal of the interior of the TARDIS, and it looks and feels really, really nice. It feels fresh. The new console itself is beautiful, absolutely beautiful. It's an organic, motherly created approach to the TARDIS. It's a crystallized TARDIS with multiple kind of steps up to the main control hub. It's a bit like David Tennant's TARDIS in terms of feel. You've got a walkway around the sides, but then you've got the actual steps up onto the console point, which very nicely isn't metal grated, so it's not constantly there when you hear a character step on the floor. A lot of complaints online are stating that this TARDIS console is too dark. It is too dark in this episode, I'll agree. However, cast your minds back to the 2012 special The Snowmen, so Series 7 Episode 6, or Series 7 Part A Episode 6, when Amy and Rory have disappeared and we get the Victorian version of Clara. That was dark. The reveal of that was dark compared to how we saw it in The Bells of St. John or The Rings of Akaten. It had really been brightened up by that point. And the same thing goes for this episode, so I don't understand why people are declaring this episode as, "Oh, the TARDIS console room is just too dark." It's too dark in this one moment, but it's also just been built. It's going to find its way to appear eventually. That's why it takes so long for the TARDIS to rebuild itself. It's got a completely infinite number of rooms and an infinite amount of space in there. It'll still be tinkering its way through, which is where we get to Rosa next week and we see that the TARDIS is a lot brighter and a lot more well lit. So the writing for this, so it's written by Chris Chibnall. It's a bit of a slow burner, but it develops the story in the background of Desolation of the actual planet itself. Jodie's Doctor is incredible from the off, taking charge. I wish we got... During serious moments, this character really does feel like the Doctor. However, the wackiness and zaniness can put people off sometimes in reference to how alien the character feels. It can often feel a bit too much. However, I really wish that we got more of Jodie being this really kind of serious but light-hearted incarnation of the character. Someone that can have a bit of a laugh and a joke, but when the situation arises, jumps in, takes control of the situation. With Yaz and Armstrong waiting for the ship to kind of be charged and ready to move, and on the ship itself there are some really, really nice character moments between them. Chris Chibnall is definitely someone that develops character before developing the narrative, and you can tell that from The Hungry Earth and The Cold Blood, from The Power of Three. They're all really kind of central, and even 42 and what was the other one? Dinosaurs in the Spaceship. Basically all of previous Chibnall's work on Doctor Who has been character focused, and the story, whilst has been more developed in other areas, take The Power of Three, that is a massively heavy character piece, which you can very clearly tell was meant to be a two-parter, however never got round to it, and then Chris Chibnall never did some more rewrites, so there we go. Whether that was due to commitments with Broadchurch and other things, that episode was definitely one of the flat episodes of the Moffat era for Matt Smith, unfortunately. However, with the Doctor not being in control for the first half of the episode, it easily allows it to continue the plot with our characters all of them being the audience perspective characters for the first half. So the companions are meant to be the audience perspective. They're meant to ask the questions, see it from our point of view, all the alienness and wackiness going on. But with the Doctor out of control, she's just in the same situation as we are. We've never heard of this planet, or never heard of the race, or never seen this kind of feel for Doctor Who before. And Jodie's kind of taking characters through that, as well as the characters taking us through that. It's a wonderful, almost meta way of looking at an audience perspective figure for these first couple of episodes. It's really, really well paid off, these character moments, and we get them all throughout the series. It's really, really nice to see. So the visuals, without repeating myself too much from last week, wow. The shots and the way that they move the camera looks so fluid and so beautiful. Shooting on location in South Africa does do this episode wonders of good in terms of cinematography, in terms of lighting, in terms of how it feels, how it looks, how tangible it is. It definitely is a massive visual upgrade from last week, mainly because we've got more going on. You know, we've got the sniper bot interfaces, and we've got the remnant cloth figures, and we've got the laser effects, and we've got the spaceship crashing sequences, which work really, really, really well. We've got the fluidity of the camera within the entire story, you know, moving around the TARDIS, moving around the spaceships, the drone shots of the actual monument with the characters being chased away. It feels very, very cinematic. The new lenses are doing absolute wonders in terms of bringing the colour and bringing the real kind of depth of field and gritty filmness of this series. It looks wonderful. The pacing does feel slow with the extra time, however it does progress the pace towards the second half. However, like I said with the enemies, if the enemies were there from the start, the pace would have always stuck at a high figure, and we still could have had the character moments. So potentially that might have worked another way round. If the sniper bots had followed Angstrom and Epzo to Desolation and were really kind of building on the threat and building on the hunt, because of course they don't need to rest, they don't need to sleep. They could instantly charge the battery to the boat. You know, it's little things like that that would be really building up towards getting a massive showdown at the end, almost like we see in Day of the Moon with the Silence and River Song and the Doctor. You could have that all out, just aliens and enemies battling each other, and that would have worked really well. However, due to this episode being focused on character, it doesn't feel like a slog at all. You very quickly get to half an hour into this episode, and then you very quickly get to the end of it. I don't know what it is about the pacing. I think it could have been better with the enemy threats. However, there's nothing really bad with it. It's just the lack of a villain really kind of lets this episode down. The music, you don't notice it, and that's a good thing. Again, the music is incredibly soundscapey and really builds on this alien world. There's lots of synths, there's lots of bubbling kind of notes and tones and small phrases and music. The conversation scenes are subtly underscored. They've got the most synth elements in them to really kind of almost classic series the feel, so that you've got all the character moments being done by the music as well as the dialogue, as well as the actors, as well as the cinematography. The entire feel comes together within this episode. The dramatic moments, however, are really, really good at building up. Segun Akinola uses a lot of drums within his music for military purposes, for tension purposes, for rhythmic purposes, or just to kind of give a more modern feel in some elements, like the Call of Duty scene and like the ending of Resolution that we'll get to, which is the Series 11 New Year's Day special / the Series 12 Episode 0 special. So key moments from this episode: the opening spaceships crashing was phenomenally shot. The chase from the sniper bots, used a lot of frantic camera movements to give this sense of urgency, as long as some sweeping drone shots to really give you a scale of what's going on. The Stenza reveal was a wonderful kind of character reaction-y shot, and we actually find out that Armstrong's wife was killed by the Stenza as well as Graham's wife. Now that really pushes character drive for Graham, I think, at this point, as well as Armstrong, to finally relate to the characters that she's been travelling with and really feel as though, yeah, they're in it for the same purpose as she is. Whilst she's there for the race, they're all on this adventure for one thing, and that is to make sure that good in the universe comes to the forefront and that the enemies of the universe are stopped. And it's really, really nice. And the TARDIS reveal as well, that's just shot wonderfully. So 1 year on, how do we feel? Again, I'm in two minds about the pacing. It might feel a little bit slow. However, I enjoyed myself a lot more than the initial viewing. All the characters are on points, tension, but energy within them. They're wanting to do what's right, but there is tension between Angstrom and Epzo. There is tension between Epzo and Graham. There's tension between Ryan and Graham. There's tension between the Doctor and Epzo. There's a lot of growth in this, but there's a lot of energy to really progress the story. And it sets up the Timeless Child. Now, this, in reflection to the end of Series 11, hasn't been revealed yet. However, look at Silence Will Fall, look at Bad Wolf, look at things like that. They were set up years before coming to proper flourishment within the series. And I think with the Timeless Child, I think it could be one of many things, and I think it's too early to speculate, and I don't actually have my idea. I think with more ammunition, I could state it. No, it's not River. No, it's not Jack. No, it's not Susan. Let's just say that right now. Chris Chibnall would not want to risk to do that to himself. He's not wrote an episode with Jack in. He's not wrote an episode with River in. He's not wrote an episode with Susan in. Why he wouldn't bring them characters back, because I think whilst Chris Chibnall has a approach on character, I think he would want to set up his own character, and I believe that the Timeless Child's probably a reference to the Doctor. However, we can't be 100% sure on that front. So my final score for The Ghost Monument is an 8 out of 10. The episode continues straight from the previous one and continues the trend of character development laced throughout the plot. A simple idea, the execution is where the episode is made. However, with the lack of a real villain and with some pacing issues slowing it down, it can feel a little rushed and full of ideas, especially towards the second and third half. The Stenza reveal at the end sets up more character, and the Stenza's influence throughout the series starts to take shape. However, the visuals and music seriously bump this up for a very fun, enjoyable watch. It hooks your audience in, as it should from the first episode, and reminds them to keep watching Doctor Who on how good the show can look. The time flies by, albeit with some slow, unnecessary moments. And that's my thoughts on The Ghost Monument. Now, I hope you enjoyed listening. If you do, there's going to be plenty more next week on Doctor Who, the Classic Podcast. I've been Matt. Thank you for listening. Bye bye. Theme music by Alexander Urban. TARDIS elements by Daniel J. Patton. Background elements by Videohive. Music by Sego Nakanola. Audio used from the BBC show Doctor Who is copyright to the BBC. If you haven't already, make sure you hit the subscribe button so you're notified every time a new podcast is released, or follow me on social media at mcfilms2018 on Twitter, or send me an email at enquiries.mcfilms@gmail.com. Copyright disclaimer under Section 107 of the Copyright Act 1976. Allowance is made for fair use
for purposes such as criticism, comment, news reporting, teaching, scholarship, education and research. Fair use is a use permitted by copyright statute that might otherwise be infringing.